Welcome to an Achieving Science video. This video is going to cover reflex. So sometimes waiting for your brain to make a decision is just too slow. Therefore, what we need to have in place are reflexes. Now reflexes, they're automatic responses. And they're automatic responses to certain stimuli, ones potentially that can cause you harm. Therefore, reflexes are there to reduce the chances of injury and damage. Now, what a reflex can do is it can also trigger chemicals, so hormones, to be released within your bloodstream. For instance, adrenaline. And what reflexes will do, in order for them to be coordinated, is they will follow a certain pathway called a reflex arc. So now we need to know what happens in a reflex arc. What are the key components? So this is easier if we actually use an example. So if we use an example of touching a hot stove, for instance, we can go through what happens. Like when you've looked at the nervous system before, a reflex starts with a stimulus, which in this case is the temperature. It's too hot. This information is detected by your receptors, in your skin in this instance. These receptors will therefore then trigger an electrical impulse to be generated. This electrical impulse will be sent along a sensory neuron, and it will carry this electrical impulse, this signal, to the CNS, your central nervous system. In this case, it would be likely to be your spinal cord because it's nearer to your hand. The CNS will then produce an impulse, which will be passed along a relay neuron. This is inside your central nervous system, so inside your spinal cord. The relay neuron will then relay that information to a motor neuron. Following this, an impulse, an electrical impulse again, will flow down your motor neuron to your effector. And in our example, this will be our arm muscle. When our effector then receives this information, it will result in a response. And in this case, the muscle will contract, therefore causing the hand to be pulled away from that hot stove to prevent any further injury or harm being caused. Now, usually in an exam, this will be shown via a diagram. Now, don't get confused by this diagram. Let's label a few parts of this diagram. So first of all, we have the spinal cord. This is the cross-section through it. At the top, we have the receptors, all feeding into the sensory neuron, which is going to carry the electrical impulse into our central nervous system. The sensory neuron then feeds into the relay neuron, which then feeds into the motor neuron, which carries the electrical impulse to the effector, which in this case is shown as a muscle. There is one more stage though to include. In the diagram, there are gaps seen between the neurons. So between the sensory and the relay neuron, there is a gap. If we blow up this gap, we can see what is happening. Where neurons meet, there is a special junction. This is called a synapse. This is where the electrical signal is converted to a chemical signal. And if enough chemical is passed, it triggers an electrical impulse in the next neuron. There is in fact two neurons in the previous diagram.